So this session is going to go over calculator skills that you'll need for the foundation and the higher tier. So on the foundation tier, that would be paper 1 and paper 3, and then on the higher tier, that will be paper 4 and paper 6. So it's your first and last papers that you do. So on the screen you can see the 3 different types of Casio calculator that you probably will have seen in school. Most of you will be more familiar with the one on the left and the one in the middle, because they're the versions that have been around for the longest, and the one on the right hand side is the newest version that's been out for about a year now. If you have got your own calculator, obviously it could be any one of the 3, it depends how long you've had it for. If you're using calculators that are given to you in the exam hall, it's most likely going to be one that's on the left or in the middle. When I go through some of the exam questions today, I'm going to be using a calculator that's on the left-hand side, but most of the functions that we use are going to be in the same place for all 3 calculators, so it doesn't matter which one you have. So before we get started on some exam style questions, the first thing we're going to do is show you how to do a factory reset onto your calculator. When you get into the exam hall, particularly if you're using one that's given to you in the exam room, you want to make sure that you're resetting your calculator so it's in the mode that you want it to be. Sometimes you will have noticed in lessons, if you've borrowed calculators, if you press your fraction button, sometimes you don't get this symbol, you get something else. And that can be really difficult for you to be able to use if you don't know how to change your mode. So if you have a look above the digit 9, it says reset. On some calculators it says CLR for clear. They do the same thing. Again, if you're unsure how to do this on your specific calculator, please do ask one of the teachers and we'll show you how to do it. So we want to get this reset function, so we're going to press shift and then the digit 9, and then it will come up with reset. So data, memory or all. We want to get rid of all of it, we want to reset the whole thing. So we're going to press the digit 3. It asks if it kind of confirms that we actually want to reset the calculator. So we're going to press our equals button and then we're going to press the all clear key. So now, and you'll notice at the top, you've only really got these 2 things that have got that have been made bold. If you've got any other ones, it's likely that someone's changed the mode, so you want to make sure that it's in a working order for you. So now we're going to just have a look at our keys so that we know which ones are particularly important and just some other tricks that we might want to be able to use. So at the bottom you've got your basic number key. You've got your pi symbol at the bottom here, and you've also got your percentage button here, which can be useful, but do take note that the exam boards are being quite picky about you showing you're working out and not writing, for example, 17% of something. They're wanting to show how you would work it out mathematically. So although that's useful for you, in some instances, you've got to make sure that you write your full working out down. And then here, you've got your main kind of scientific calculator keypad. So the first thing we're going to have a look at are kind of the more ones that you're going to use often. So you've obviously got your brackets, so anytime you're doing something that's to do with bid maths, you want to make sure that you're using those appropriately. You've got your SD button, that converts numbers from decimals to fractions and vice versa. You can also convert from mixed numbers to improper fractions. So for example, if I open up my fraction button and I type 9/5, which is improper, it will come up as an improper fraction straight away, but if I press shift and the fraction button, it will turn it into a mixed number for me, and then it will go through to a decimal and an improper fraction as well. So that's an important button. On the newer calculators, at the bottom you've got a button that says EXP that allows you to change, or format, sorry, that allows you to change between various different functions. Then you've got, some people can use this for your negative number button. You can also use the minus sign, as long as you're using it in brackets. That shouldn't be a problem. You've got your time button, so if you're converting things into time, you can use this button as well. Then you've got your sine, cosine and tangent function, so if you're doing trigonometry, obviously on the upper end of the foundation and the higher tier. And then you would press your shift button to get your inverse tan functions if you're working out angles. Then on the row above, we've got all of our kind of fraction and power buttons. So your fraction button, if you want to type a fraction into your calculator. If you want to write a mixed number, so for example 3.5, it's really important that you don't do 3 and then type in a half. Some people will use the fraction button, type a half, go back and add 3 in. That to your calculator, that doesn't mean 3.5, it means 3 lots of a half. So when you put in a mixed number, you need to use your shift and your fraction button to bring up the mixed number symbol. So if you're using mixed numbers, you want to make sure that this is what you see before you type that in. You've then obviously got your square root button and then your cube root button above it. So if square root, if you want cube root, you press shift and that button. You've then got your squared button and then x to the power of any number. So whether it's 5 to the power of 6 or whatever it might be. And then you've also got your button that allows you to put in any type of root, whether it's cube root, squared root or above. You've also got your recurring decimal symbol, which is above your x squared function. So if you need to type that in, you've got that there. You've also got your power of 10 function if you're doing things in standard form. A key button to note on your calculator, now this is particularly important for the higher tier because it does come up a lot on paper 4 and 6. It's not being used as often on the calculator papers for the foundation tier. But this button here says FACT, F-A-T. So what it does is if you type in if a question asks you to write a number as a product of its prime factors, if you tap that button, your calculator will do it for you. So say, I don't know, 560, for example. You need to type the number in and press equals so it comes up in the answer display. And then if you press shift and fact, it will give it to you as a product of its prime factors. So that can be really useful. It also can allow you to check your answers. If you're not 100% sure, you can use your calculator to check your answers. So there's just a quick overview of all of your brief buttons on your calculator. Obviously there are more buttons and some of these are more applicable to A-level maths. But what we're going to do now is have a look at some exam questions where you're going to use these buttons. So now that we've gone through a quick overview of the basic buttons and functions on your calculator, we're going to see how these can be applied to exam questions. So these are some questions that were on the foundation tier paper a couple of years ago, and a lot of people don't answer these questions because they're like, oh, I can't remember how to write this as a fraction, can't remember how to convert this to a decimal. But these are on a calculator paper and you can use your calculator for most of these in order to work out what your mark is, and these are quick one mark questions that you should be getting right. So if I type into my calculator 0.17 and press my equals button, it comes up as a fraction for me straight away. If the question asks me to simplify the fraction or give your answer in its simplest form, your calculator will do that for you automatically. So if I pick something like 0.24, for example, and I press my equals button, it has simplified it for me. So you don't need to stress and worry about converting it to a fraction and then being able to simplify it. Your calculator will do that for you. If I want to write 7/8 as a decimal, click on your fraction button, 7/8. So use your arrows at the top to manoeuvre yourself between your numerator and your denominator. Press your equals button. Now it gives us 7/8 straight away, but this is where you need to use your SD button and press your SD button and it will come up as a decimal for you. When you're doing calculations on your calculator, although you are typing things in here, the examiner can't see what you have typed into your calculator. So try and make sure that you write down any calculation that you use your calculator for and also all of the digits that you have on your calculator display. You want to make sure that if a question is asking you to round, you write down as many digits as you can to start with, and then you can round it afterwards, because if you make a mistake with your rounding, you're not going to lose out on the mark for actually using your calculator properly. So these exam questions that you can see here are to do with using our power and our root button. So the first one's relatively straightforward. You can press your power button, which has got both of them blank, so 3 to the power of 5, and obviously you can put in any digits that the question asks you to do, so 243. The next one is really important. If you're asked to cube root something or take the 4th root or the 5th root, what you do not want to do, I'll just zoom in so you can see, what you don't want to do is do 3 and your square root button, because this means something very different to what's being asked here. This means 3 multiplied by the square root of, which is not what you're being asked to do. You're being asked to cube root something. So it's really important that you press shift and your cube root button, or this button here, shift and this button, if you're asked to take the 4th root or the 5th root or whatever. So 2744, and again it comes up with the answer. Sometimes you might have to press your SD button for these ones because they can come up as fractions. And then this question, 3 to the power of -1, you can do the same thing. So 3 to the power of and then -1 will give me an answer of 1/3, but you can press your SD button to give it as a decimal. And be careful, some of your decimals, if it's got a tiny, sometimes it's hard to see, but you've got a tiny recurring dot at the top there. If you press your SD button again, it will give you what that long decimal is when it's not got the recurring dot there. So if you're being asked to round something, you can just keep pressing that SD button to help you. So if we have a look at some more, so we're getting increasing difficulty with these. So on our next slide, we're going to simplify this ratio. So what we can use is we can use our fraction button to help us do this, because like we mentioned earlier, our fraction button will simplify our fractions for us straight away. So if I open up my fraction button and type in 18/42 and press my equals button, it will come up as 3/7 as a fraction. But obviously because I am writing this as a ratio in its simplest form, 18's on the numerator for both of them, so that's where I'm going to write the number 3, and then 42 is in the same place as 7 on the denominator, so it will be in the ratio of 3 to 7. So as we can see with this one, we are getting a little bit more complex and we're being asked to do multiple things at once. So you'll notice we've got a square root, we've got an indice, we've got a negative number here. Sometimes on the exam questions they'll write a negative number more to like the top left hand corner of a number rather than this here, so that you can distinguish the difference between a subtraction sign and representing something as a negative number. When you see questions like this, these typically come up on at the start of a paper 4 or the end of your paper 1. All you need to do is replicate exactly what you see in the question on your calculator display. So the first thing we need to do is open up our square root. Then we're just going to type everything as we see. So 5.2 squared minus 4.8 multiplied by negative 6.3. Now some calculators do have a specific negative button, which is this one here, which you can use, but you can also use your subtraction sign if you want to. So if I put all of that into my calculator, it should give me an answer straight away. And again, it comes up as a fraction. In the question, I know some of it's cut off, but it says give your answer correct to 3 significant figures. So you need to press your SD button to be able to round that value. Some questions you can use your calculator for when you are plotting graphs, whether they be cubic, quadratic or linear. Obviously this one is a quadratic graph, and the reason why I've chosen this example is what a lot of people do is they will put their numbers in straight away. So they'll see minus 3 squared and subtract 4, and then they press equals negative 13, and then they move on. But what you've got to remember is you should remember that when you multiply two negative numbers together, you get a positive. So negative 3 multiplied by negative 3 gives you 9, and 9 subtract 4 is not negative 13. So when you are squaring numbers on your calculator or doing anything to do with a negative number, you've got to make sure that you put brackets around your negative number, and it has to be here like this. So you want to make sure that the negative number is inside the brackets, because what your calculator is going to see is it's going to say, oh, I need to do negative 3 squared, rather than, so if I press equals, you can see that it's 5, rather than if I get rid of my brackets, your calculator will follow BIDMAS very accurately and do 3 squared first, and that's why you end up with an incorrect answer. And then, so these last two examples are taken from the higher and the foundation tier, but again these would be ones that would be near the start of the higher tier paper and the end of the foundation tier paper. So for this first one, again, you just want to type exactly what you see in the question into your calculator. So brackets open, 6 squared, add 5, close your brackets, click on your cube button, press equals, and you've got your answer. When you see questions like this, which are quite popular, where you've got a fraction and a square root, you want to click your square root first and then open up your fraction and then type your value. So 8.4 squared minus 1.9 squared. Use your arrows to get onto your denominator. 2.5 add 5.7. And then again, if it comes up as a fraction on your answer, you want to press your SD button in order to get that as a decimal if the question asks you to round. So hopefully that's covered all of your basic questions and any issues that you might have with using your calculators. If you've got any particular questions you want to ask, please speak to your maths teacher and we will be more than happy to help.